Welcome everybody to this presentation about writing to your transplant recipients. The information is being provided to you today by the Donor Family Aftercare Department at OneLegacy. While we created this presentation to provide guidance to OneLegacy donor families, we recognize that we do share many best practices with other organ procurement organizations. However, you want to keep in mind that the information we share today may not apply to you if you're not a donor family associated with OneLegacy. So let's begin. With OneLegacy, the Donor Family Aftercare team is dedicated to supporting various donor families in a variety of ways. Our robust program consists of a mailing program, and that is timed intervals where we send literature and letters of support. We also have counseling services, both in person if you're near our Los Angeles, Orange, or Redlands offices, or if you're out of those areas, phone grief support. If you can get to our Los Angeles, Orange, or Redlands areas, we have monthly grief support workshops. Those are all for free. We also have a private Facebook support group that you can join just by requesting a waiver. And we have a companion newsletter that's sent 4 times a year. You can stay on it past 3 years, but you do have to let us know that you'd like to stay on that newsletter at around the 3rd year marker. We also have a variety of different kinds of memorial events. What we know is that finding ways to remember loved ones is one of the things that research and our experience shows can help someone in their grief process. So we have donor remembrance ceremonies. These are offered in March each year for the previous year's donors. So families are only invited to attend one ceremony. The Donate Life Run Walk is in April, usually the last Saturday of April in Orange County at Cal State Fullerton. And we have a variety of events in and around the Rose Parade float out of Pasadena. We have the Donate Life float, and families can decorate side by side with each other for free, or for a nominal fee, they can dedicate a rose in memory of their loved ones and make an appointment to place that in person. We also offer medical and tissue updates on recipients. So whether it's 6 months or 12 months or longer since your loved one donated, you do need to request this. It's not provided automatically, but you would just contact the Donor Family Aftercare team and let them know that you're ready to receive news about how your loved one's whole organ recipients or the outcome of your loved one's tissue or cornea donation. If a family wants to reach out and communicate with their recipient or meet their recipient, we also are the team that coordinates that. And that's what this presentation is all about. So a little background about OneLegacy. OneLegacy serves as a bridge between over 200 hospitals in the Southern California area and 14 transplant centers. Now, what that means is that the government has kind of trusted us to be the deacons of the gift of life, hope, and health, and to be the stewards of that gift between hospitals and transplant centers. That also means that we're the bridge between donors and their families and recipients who need those life-saving gifts. Many donor families ask whether or not we can help them get in contact with their loved ones' recipients, and some wonder how their loved ones' organ recipients are doing months and years after the transplant. Or they might wish to know how many people were helped with their loved ones' tissue, such as bone, skin, or corneas. Now, families sometimes find it confusing as to whether their loved one was an organ or a tissue donor, and some loved ones gave the gift of both organ and tissue, while others gave the gifts of either organ or tissue. Now, all donors and donor families are honored for the willingness to help others regardless of the outcome of donation. So even if donation is authorized and we have to medically close the case and we can't move forward into transplantation, that donor is still honored as a donor and the donor family still has access to services. But for the purposes of clarifying the process of contacting recipients, we need to discuss some of those differences in contacting organ recipients versus tissue recipients. What do we mean? Well, let's first talk about organ donors and organ recipients. Your loved one is an organ donor if they donated heart, kidneys, lungs, liver, small bowel, or pancreas. And typically, they had to be on a ventilator in a hospital at the time of donation in order to donate these vital whole organs. Organs require immediate transplantation, and therefore there typically is a recipient very close to the time of donation. Recipients are associated with a local transplant center, or they can be non-local and out of state. With kidney, for example, the person can live all the way in New York on the other side of the country. Typically, we send what we call an outcome letter to families within the first few months of donation. This outcome letter provides information about what organs were able to be transplanted, and it provides general profile of the recipients depending on the information that was released by the transplant center. Now, when it comes to contacting organ recipients, all organ donor families have the ability to write their loved ones recipients if the transplant went through. However, after looking at about 3 years of data, we found that only about 8% of our donor families initiate writing or reply to a recipient if a recipient writes them. This greatly limits the amount of contact that can happen, as well as the amount of meetings that can happen. Communication has to go through the transplant center initially because OneLegacy or any organ procurement organization does not have direct contact information on recipients. It's actually part of HIPAA or private health laws, meaning we can't know who the recipients are, neither can the hospital, neither can the donor family. So we have to send the information to the transplant center who have contact with the recipients. Now, donor families can request a medical update once every 6 months on whole organ recipients. These updates are not provided automatically. The request has to be initiated by the donor family because we found that some donor families prefer not to have the follow-up information. So before you request an update, make sure you have the support in your life and you feel ready to deal with favorable news, as well as the possibility that your loved one's recipients are not doing well, or that they are lost to follow-up. Maybe they've gone back to their primary care physician and that transplant center no longer has contact with them, which means that we can't get into contact with them through the transplant center. Sometimes we're unable to locate their care provider for an update, and that can happen particularly the longer you wait to get updates or to try to have contact. Some people are just happy knowing that they did what they could to help others, and they don't want to deal with the potential bad news that the recipient's not doing well, or that the transplant did not go through, or anything else of this nature. So many people aren't ready to request an update because they just don't feel like they can deal with any additional negative news. And other people feel ready to know one way or the other. They just want to know. So with tissue donors and tissue recipients, it's quite different. Your loved one is a tissue donor if they donated corneas, heart valves, veins, skin, and or bone. And typically, tissue donation can happen in conjunction with organ donation, but more people die in a way that they can be a tissue donor and that they can have tissue recipients. You don't have to be in a hospital, and you can have, your loved one could have died outside of a hospital and still be a tissue donor, but that is not the case with organ donation. Now, tissue can be preserved for up to 10 years. So unlike organs, which require immediate transplantation, tissues can be preserved up to 10 years. Now that means that donation can help many more individuals over time, but due to this, direct tissue recipients are unknown at the time of donation. Just like with organ, a typical recovery letter or outcome letter is sent to families within the first few months of donation. That letter simply states what specific gifts of tissue we were able to recover and the ways that those typical types of tissues can help other people, but it has no information about whether or not tissue is transplanted and how many people were helped. Again, you would have to contact us and request that if you're interested in knowing how much your loved one's tissue donation helped other people. And typically we'll be able to gather that information for the first time at around 12 months post donation. Now, in terms of contacting tissue recipients, well, currently donor families are unable to initiate communication with tissue recipients. It's because of the complexities involved with research and transplantation of donated tissues, because of privacy laws that prohibit OneLegacy from knowing who received a tissue transplant or how to contact them. That's why we can't initiate contact with them. However, if a tissue recipient writes you, we forward the letter to you if we have the correct contact information on file for you, and you may be able to write back if the tissue recipient, if the patient gave that information to the company that we work with. Now, although you can't initiate writing to a tissue recipient, you can request a medical update on those tissues about 12 months after donation. We can research how your loved one's tissue has been used. And the information that we get back is general in nature. Sometimes we can just find out how many people were helped. Other times we can find out a little more information, like the age range or the gender or the state in which the recipient lives. Sometimes we can find out the type of tissue that they received and what type of surgery it was used for. It all depends on the hospitals and surgeons returning information to the tissue company that we work with, who then needs to return it back to us upon your request. So the testing and quality assurance process typically leads to transplantation at about the 12-month marker after donation. OneLegacy does not receive automatic updates on how tissue was processed or transplanted. The request has to be initiated by the donor family because, again, some donor families prefer not to know the follow-up information. Now, that being said, let's go through an overview of donor family and recipient communication program. This is typically for whole organ donor families and whole organ recipients, but let's go through it together. Now, OneLegacy strongly believes in the benefits of correspondence and meetings between donor families and recipients, and we actually encourage communication. We try to companion both donor families and recipients through the process. And we even work on a national level to try to change some of the ways that tissue donor families and tissue recipients can begin to exchange information. What you want to know is that communication is encouraged. The sooner a recipient or a donor family writes each other, the sooner we're able to find the other party and get that communication to them. Now, there's no waiting period to write or to meet. Now, sometimes, depending on the health of the recipient or the transplant center, they may want to wait for a meeting, but typically they don't have a waiting period for writing. We at OneLegacy have no waiting period to write or meet. Again, the sooner you write, the more likely the transplant center will have recent contact information for that patient, the recipient, and they will be able to forward your letter to that person. If one party is ready to reveal more or express an interest in meeting, we go over what we call the benefits and considerations for direct contact. In the interest of minimizing barriers that would prevent you from connecting with the recipient, we do not utilize a formal release form that you have to read and sign. We just want to have a conversation about the benefits and considerations and get your verbal agreement to review and document that conversation. Our social services staff are available to assist with any meetings should they move forward. Before we get into the details, let's take a brief moment to clear up some common misconceptions. There are many misconceptions about donation. There are also many misconceptions about donor family and recipient communication. So as we go through this, think about which of the following is a myth or a fact. Myth or fact: you must wait until a recipient contacts you to write. All donor families of vital organ donors have the ability to write recipients. If you're interested in communicating, please initiate writing. Now, it is a fact if you're a tissue donor family, you must wait until the recipient contacts you. Myth or fact, you must wait at least 1 year before contacting the recipient. What do you think? Myth. There's no waiting period to write or meet, and sooner is always better. It means we are more likely to be able to forward your communication to the patient recipient. And we do recommend writing sooner than later because it may become more difficult for us to have updated contact information for the family on the other side as time passes. Myth or fact, it is better to be anonymous in the first letter to the transplant recipient. Actually, fact. Despite the meaningful connection to your loved one's recipient, you are communicating with a complete stranger, so please proceed with caution. Now, what do we mean by this? Well, we encourage anonymity in the first contact for 2 reasons. Number 1, with internet and social media, it's so easy to be found if you're not ready to be found. And number 2, we want people to be mindful that the recipient may not be ready to receive any detailed information about you if you're ready to write very soon in the process. So we protect the recipient and the donor family's identity until they're ready to reveal more. If there comes a time when you or the recipient are ready to meet, we conduct an appropriate screening of both parties and provide options and choices so that you can both choose what is right for you. All right, so let's talk about the benefits of writing, the benefits for the donor family and the benefits for the recipient. So for a donor family, the benefits are that sharing might be helpful in your grieving process. Many families tell us that it helps them feel like they made the right decision to say yes to donation or to honor their loved one's decision to say yes to donation. Other benefits for the recipient are it gives the recipient a chance to express gratitude, and that can help them with their continued physical healing. Also, sharing a personal transplant story can be really empowering to both the recipient and the donor family. Research has shown that the act of expressing gratitude and counting blessings helps with healing, and writing to the donor family or meeting the family is an opportunity for a recipient to share their story and help with their personal grief and loss journey themselves. So we have developed a couple of tools to help you with this process. We have a brochure called Writing to Transplant Recipients, a guide for donor families. It provides guidelines on how and what to write. It's mailed to organ donor families at the 3-month marker. Actually, I believe that's at the 6-month marker. Please forgive me for that error. And it's also available online. All you have to do is Google the keyword Writing to Transplant Recipients OneLegacy, and it will show up for you. This brochure summarizes much of the information that I'll be covering on the following slides. For instance, when you're writing to a transplant recipient, what you can send is a handwritten card or letter. You can do a typed letter. You can submit it electronically online at the OneLegacy website. Again, Google the keyword recipient contact OneLegacy, and that will come up pretty quickly. You can send photos. You can also send small gifts, a memento of sorts. However, please be mindful that gifts valued at more than $50 are considered inappropriate on either side. You have already given the gift that is invaluable, and that is life and health to other people. So we don't want either person to feel like they need to put a monetary gift behind a gift that was already given and received. Also, if you do decide to send a gift, please don't send anything perishable like fruit or flowers, because it can take several weeks for the item to get to us and process us, plus then it needs to go on to the transplant center, who may take several weeks to get it to the recipient, and the item can go bad. Handmade items and illustrations can be meaningful and are often sent from donor families to recipients and vice versa. Now, more about writing to transplant recipients. You want to write information that you feel comfortable sharing about you, your loved one, or other family members. And this could include things like hobbies or occupation or interests. You might want to write about how your decision to donate affected you. And you might want to remember to use simple language. Using language that can appeal to all age groups and backgrounds is really important, because you want to keep in mind that we don't know anything about the other person, and there's no educational background or particular religion or even way of living that is required of a transplant recipient. The only thing that's required is that the gift goes to somebody that can best care for the gift and make it last as long as possible. So please keep in mind also that your recipient's primary language may not be English, and we work to get those letters translated when we know that information. Some helpful phrases that you could consider writing about and completing the sentence is "Dear recipient." You don't have to know their name, just "Dear recipient. I think of you often when," or "My loved one or our family made the decision to donate because," "I wish you good health," "I would love to hear from you," "I would love to meet you," and then sign it, "Sincerely, your donor family." Now remember, if you wish to stay anonymous in your letter, you want to avoid using any last names, city, street address, names of hospitals or physicians. That makes it too easy to find you. You also want to include first names only for yourself, also for your family, for your loved one, and sign only your first name. You may include the state in which you live and photos if you wish, but again, those could be used to find you. Now, in writing to your transplant recipients, the way that you can submit them is, again, you can send your letter or card by either submitting your letter online at that link or Google keyword recipient contact OneLegacy. It's the OneLegacy website, and it's a form in the aftercare section. You can also just send us an email, and in the body of the email, you can include your full name, the name and date of death of your loved one, your loved one's full name, and send it to familycare@onelegacy.org. You can mail your letter. Now, if you mail a letter, please place the letter in an unsealed envelope because we do review them. Also, you want to include a separate sheet of paper with your full name, the name and date of death of your loved one, and maybe even include your most current contact information to make sure that we have it up to date. An email, a phone number would be very helpful. And you can mail it, or if you had a little gift you wanted to send, you could mail it to OneLegacy, Attention Donor Family Aftercare, 221 South Figueroa Street, Suite 500, Los Angeles, California, 90012. So, where does the letter go, you might wonder? Well, you as the donor family send it to us at OneLegacy, who sends it on to the transplant center, who has contact with the recipient. The aftercare staff at OneLegacy reviews each letter and keeps a copy on file. We forward your letter to the recipient's transplant center, whose responsibility it is to pass on your letter to the recipient. The process can take several weeks or months depending on the transplant center. We keep it on file because we want to make sure we have a copy in case something gets lost in the mail or you lose it later and you want a second copy. All donor family and recipient letters that are received by OneLegacy are processed out within 10 business days or 15 business days if the letter requires language translation. We've asked transplant centers to inform us if the letters can't be forwarded to a recipient for any reason, and typically we let you know that if they contact us. Please keep in mind that recipients may write or write back at any time. In the years ahead, please keep us informed of any change in your phone number, your email address, or your mailing address so that the rare opportunity of communication is not lost. You might be wondering, will I hear from recipients? Well, just as some donor families prefer privacy and choose not to write, a recipient might not write or respond due to a variety of reasons. Some of these reasons include things like fear of adding to your grief. If they write you at the wrong time, will it bring back your grief and cause you to feel worse? Some recipients are still struggling with ill health. Typically, you need a transplant when you're not in good health, and the recovery process can be long for many. Some recipients tell us that they have guilt about their improved health, or they just have difficulty expressing the emotions. They lack the words to say thank you. They lack information about their ability to contact you. We try to go out to our local transplant centers at least once a quarter, if not twice a year, and make sure that they have all the information necessary to educate recipients about the ability to write. But even with that said, if you don't hear from your recipient, our experience tells us that transplant recipients are profoundly grateful for their gift of life. Some common questions that we get are, can I communicate directly with the recipient? Now, although it's rare, it is possible as long as both parties are agreeable to the direct contact and they're aware of the benefits and considerations for direct contact. So please contact us for guidance through this process. We really want you to know what to expect and know what some general ethical guidelines are, rather than trying to find the person without the support of the social services team at OneLegacy. So, for more information, you can find more information on our website, onelegacy.org. You can Google the keyword recipient contact OneLegacy, or you can contact us at 800-423-7220 or email us at familycare@onelegacy.org. Feel free to contact our Donor Family Aftercare team if we can be of assistance. And with that said, we thank you for tuning in today to this. When you talk about the gift of life, the stories that you experience are examples of a donor family's courageous decision to say yes and how it can come full circle. So I just want to end by thanking you all for the work that you do, because without these magical experiences between you and recipients, things like this wouldn't happen, and these gifts of life could not happen.